now introduce our speaker, Mark Williams. As I was reading his bio, and he said, I really don't like it when people get up there and read all that stuff. That's all I know to do. So that's what I'm going to do. But as I was looking at the first line, he says that he is the 6th person to head this government agency since its beginning, and I got thinking, hell, I've served with 4 of them, so I'm getting pretty old, I guess. But I had the pleasure of serving with Lawrence Barrett, Noel Holcomb, and Chris Clark, all who did a fantastic job. And of course, I know Joe Tanner and Leonard Ledbetter. But Mark Williams has come to us from the General Assembly and from South Georgia, and I think his nickname is Gator. Is that what it is? He's a special guy. I'm gonna read you his bio, whether he likes it or not. And he's Commissioner of Natural Resources. Mark is the 6th person to head the Department of Natural Resources, and it's approximately 2,300 employees. DNR has statewide responsibilities for the management and conservation of Georgia's natural, historic, and cultural resources, including fish and wildlife, land conservation, coastal resources, historic preservation, sustainability initiatives, and air and water quality.
Still not used to those long introductions. I told Bill, I said, get to hearing all that stuff, you start looking around for an undertaker. Any here today? There we go. We got a buzzard in the house. I too want to thank Bill. You come to this job straight out of the private sector. Board members rotate in and out, and we've got a lot of new ones. But Bill, I don't want to comment on his age, but he's getting to be, I think, probably our 2nd most senior board member on the board, and has been a true friend of mine since I got here. He represented y'all's interests very well, but also just as a sort of a mentor and helped me get settled in, and I thank you for that, Bill. I really appreciate that. I also want to take a minute to recognize a couple of members of the General Assembly. I saw Senator Heath, you'll raise your hand, and Representative Braddock. Thank y'all for coming. It's a difficult, daunting task. I served in the House for 2 terms. Back when there was a lot of money to go around, about $22 billion, and then just like that figure went to about 17 and a half. And so I can tell you it doesn't look any better from this side than it did over there, y'all. But you folks have great representation up there in the House and Senate as well. And we had even in a downturn, we had a good budget year, and I thank you folks for that. I appreciate that. I also want to recognize Homer. Homer's the Deputy Commissioner. He's over state parks and historic preservation and a few other things that I hand him on a daily basis. And Kathy is my right hand, my left hand. Real early on, she learned to use the term surveying instead of hunting. And because she sends my wife my calendar too, and every now and then I like to slip in a little hunting and fishing stuff. But I love her like a sister, and she does me a great job. I also wanted to recognize Brandon Reese, a friend of mine from the Capitol. Brandon, raise your hand. Brandon has nothing to do with DNR, but I want you to know, you guys that are in the healthcare profession around here, you have great representation under the gold dome with Brandon. He's very professional, and I knew him from my old days in the legislature, so thank you for being here, Brandon. And then a couple I really don't want to recognize because they're probably already circulating pictures, but I have 2 fraternity brothers in the audience. They're sitting at this table right here, so any of the pictures they may be circulating are from my evil twin back at Georgia College in 1986. Keith says he's saving it. He said the commissioner only brings a certain price. If you try for something else, the price will go up. I guess I'll start off by telling you a little bit about DNR. Most people associate DNR with law enforcement, or my guys in my green uniforms and badges. As a matter of fact, when Governor Deal called me, Governor-elect Deal at the time, I was in Kansas deer hunting. And my phone started going off with all these 404 numbers, and so I finally got somebody to answer the other end, and it was Governor-elect Deal. And he asked me, and I accepted. And Got home and the newspapers started going crazy, but all my hunting buddies were like, yeah, when you get your badge and your gun. I mean, that's all they called it. And so I start off these talks by telling you first just sort of how we're organized. We have 5 divisions in DNR. The first one's wildlife resources, which is the game wardens. It's my scientists, my biologists, and all those folks. They're located down at Social Circle. And they're in that section also is a non-game section. A lot of people don't know, but Georgia has a lot of things that they only exist in this state. I mean, they don't exist anywhere else in the world. One being the Etowah darter, for instance. A little old fish like this, that's how big he gets when he's fully grown. And so we have a whole non-game section too that manages that resource. Then our second division is on the coast. If you head down 17 and you're going, we still call it the New Bridge down there. It's about 10 years old now. If you look over to the left in the marsh, there's a big gray building with a lot of glass. That's a DNR building, and that's coastal resources. Georgia has 1/3 of the entire marshland on the eastern seaboard resides inside the state of Georgia. So that's a very important resource that we have to manage. And so we have a whole division. They enforce the Shoreline Protection Act and the Coastal Marshland Protection Act, and then of course our rangers do the saltwater fishing and that regulatory function. And then my largest division is state parks. We have 64 of those. They run from Cloudland Canyon all the way down to Skidaway. I say state parks and historic sites. And that is housed in the same building I'm in. We call them the Twin Towers. If you go to the Capitol, the 2 big square buildings, excuse me. And state parks is housed there with us. And then we have historic preservation, which is on the other side of the Capitol. It's about a block away from our office. Historic preservation is the smallest division. It has about 20 employees, and they do tax credits and stuff for historic. They do a lot of work with DOT and that function. And they also we house the state's archaeology department there too. So the state's archaeologist is the director of HPD. And then the 5th one is Environmental Protection Division. See, tons of smiles go up when I say that one. It's a little weird how our relationship with them. If you look on the internet at our website, it's shown as a division of DNR. They're lumped in with us for budgeting purposes. But the governor actually appoints that director just like he does. He is my equal. And so, sort of separate, sort of together, it's how we are. But they're also housed in our building as well. And that director's name is Judd Turner. He's a new director. And a few other things you may not know about DNR. We manage over 1 million acres of lands across this state. We welcome nearly 10 million visitors to our state parks each year, and we generate an economic impact of $600 million per year. We have nearly 500,000 hunters in Georgia, and they generate an economic impact of $1.1 billion with a B. Anglers, they generate more than there's 1 million of them, and they have an economic effect worth $1.9 billion, our fishermen do. So with responsibilities ranging from law enforcement to education to outdoor recreation, we're obviously a very diverse agency. Ultimately, though, our divisions work together because we're committed to the big and important job of taking care of the resources that our families love here in Georgia. At DNR, it's our responsibility to provide a variety of recreational opportunities on our public lands for everybody to enjoy the outdoors and help preserve and protect both our natural and cultural resources. That's a little bit about DNR. I want to talk to you now about sort of how we do it. As I said before, these days you can't talk about much about how you do anything without talking about the budget. Since FY08, our budget is down 26%, and it's been real tough, but we, like every other agency in the state of Georgia, are just learning to do things a little bit leaner. Becoming leaner, though, has caused us to have layoffs, and we've had to transition several hundred employees from full-time to part-time. Becoming leaner also affected our service delivery, as some of you may know. For example, our public fishing areas now are closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. They're still open 5 days a week, but we had to close them 2 days. And we've cut services in many state parks and closed some seasonally. Some examples are some of them in the mountains where the roads would get so bad anyway that we didn't have campers, so we did that. We've also decreased some of the days at our historic sites. None of these decisions, I can tell you, have been easy, but we've tried to make these cuts in places where they had the least amount of impact. One of the reasons we're so careful is because heritage, tourism, hunting and fishing, and other outdoor activities are also a great source of income for the state. Because natural resources and cultural resources are economic drivers, I'll be focusing where I can wisely invest our state dollars to get the most return on our investments coming up. In FY13, DNR will be receiving over $12 million in bond funds. Over half of these bonds will be going for constructing, repairing, and maintaining facilities across the state. Some of you that have traveled, how many campers we got in here? Some of you that have traveled, you know that we've got a huge backlog of deferred maintenance. Even in our wildlife resources, but mostly in our parks division. For example, we've got lodges like Unicoi up in Helen that are money makers for the state, but are in serious need of renovation. That park was built 40 years ago. And I want to make sure we're reinvesting those dollars just like you do in your businesses in the private sector, so that folks will want to bring their families back year after year. We also, in our parks, have small investments for overnight accommodations, things like yurts. Anybody here know what a yurt is? I didn't either. It's a little half, it's woodened up about halfway, and then it's a tent the rest of the way up. And we're using those around the urban areas because notoriously some of our urban families aren't big campers, and so we're easing them in. It's like a half tent, half cabin type thing. So we're trying to, like at Sweetwater, we're trying to bring some of those things. But those are the type of projects we'll be doing. They're not all the time building a big lodge or doing this. Sometimes just adding a cottage here, adding a campsite here. But also, that's what we'll be focusing this coming year. But I want to spend a little bit of time now talking about the legislative session, because they just got out, and I know you guys are glad to be home. We had a couple of important bills that passed, and I wanted to talk a little bit about those with you. HB 869, which was actually signed yesterday, was a saltwater regulatory bill. Basically, for some reason, we don't know, but the department, the board, and the commissioner regulated all hunting and all freshwater fish and all saltwater fish, except for about 8 species. They were still in individual code that said, this type fish will be caught, and it'll be this length, and you can catch this many. And we have things like hard freezes where even our intercoastal waters will freeze if it gets cold enough. And I had no ability to take action and say we need to slow this fishing down. I also didn't have the ability to say, well, we can do more of this species fishing on those 8 types of fish. So that was very important because it brought those 8 species, and now the agency can regulate all fish, freshwater, salt, and honey. SB 3319 was a boat usage in state parks. This was another thing that just happened, and we looked at it and said this needs to be changed. But all our lakes on our state park had an individual bill or law that said, for this lake, you can use this horsepower, you cannot use this, you cannot use this. And me sitting there as commissioner, if we had a tremendous drought, I couldn't restrict usage. And I also, when my park ranger says the local community really would like to use a 15 horse on this lake or expand it, I couldn't do that. And so that was another bill that gave the agency the right to regulate boating on state parks so we can respond a lot quicker and more responsibly. SB 309 was a bill that got a lot of press. It was called Taylor's Law. About 3 weeks before season, I got a call from Senator Rick Jeffries and said, Mark, I've got a small young lady named Taylor Gramling that probably will not live till opening day. She wants to go deer hunting. I said, no problem, take her deer hunting. And then I hung up, called him back. That was the redneck in me, you know. And I'm learning this job, you know. I called him back and I said, let me check with Dan, my wildlife guy. So I called Dan Forrester, who runs my wildlife division. And he said, Commissioner, I don't know how you tell you this. It's sad that you do not have the right to let that little girl go hunting. And so I said, well, Dan, you put your thinking cap on, I will. And I was riding, and he was riding. And he called me back and said, if we can find somebody with a crop deprivation permit, because those can be used 365 days a year, we can let her go under that. And so Jeff Foxworthy happened to be on our foundation board. And so I called Jeff because I knew he's got not only crop deprivation, we do a lot of research on his farm, and he's got a research permit. And of course he said, yeah, can she come this afternoon? I mean, he was ready. And so, long story short, we got Taylor. She hunted that Saturday. She was successful and ended up passing away in December. But Senator Jeffries, with Homer and some of our other staff, drafted a law that would give me the right, under certain circumstances, it's very tightly drawn, to allow terminally ill children to hunt and fish that season. So we were very happy with that. SB 464, we had some folks on the coast come to us and say, we got a lot of people staying at Jekyll and come to St. Simon's for one day, and they don't want to buy a $25 3-day license. They just want to fish for one day. And so this was Senator Ligon's bill, I believe, and we certainly supported it. So we allowed, there'll be an opportunity for a one-day saltwater fishing license if you just want to go down there and fish on the pier for one day. So those were some that passed that we were real happy about. There were several bills that affected us that usually our agency only had about 4 pieces of legislation this year, but we ended up having to track about 50 to 60 because these representatives and senators can tell you sometimes in a session 1,200 bills will be dropped in a session. And so we have to track them all and watch them. But one of them was SB 360. It dealt with tilapia. Who knows what a tilapia is? You know what a Nile perch is? That's what I grew up calling them in South Georgia and North Florida. But tilapia, there were some folks that would like to see it be declassified as exotic, which means right now you can raise tilapia commercially, but we don't allow people to just put them in the pond. It has to be in a self-contained area where they're raised in tanks, basically, and they can be commercially farmed. But that one had a great discussion. I actually learned a lot through the process, as everyone did, and it did not make it out of, I don't think it made it out of committee on the House side, is where it stalled out. SB 362, which was deadhead logging, got a lot of media attention, especially down in South Georgia on the Flint and Omaha, where most of the logs were found, and that's like the show you watch on TV, where they mine these logs that broke loose. They used to float them down those rivers to the coast, and they'd break loose and sink to the bottom. And a lot of people use them for furniture and those kind of things. So, but that one fell on the House floor, passed the Senate. And then I guess the one that got the most play was SB 301, was hunting with silencers. Y'all heard about that? I'm not sure. And that one did not pass. It got talked about a lot. Silencers are certainly legal in the state of Georgia. It's a long process to get one, but they were going to decide whether or not they could hunt with them. And so we were, that one stayed where it is. HB 1043 was allowing deer breeding. That one got a great discussion in the House, but never made it out of the committee, which is deer are wildlife now. What what that bill basically would have done would classify them as livestock, where they could be bred, penned, tagged, near, artificially inseminated. And so we were happy that that one sort of stayed where it was too. But you know, all these that are still in committee, we continue to discuss, and as an agency, we keep a very open mind. And as I said on tilapia, even on deer breed, I learned a tremendous amount just going to the discussions. So you can see it was very busy. Now that session's over, I'm going to be focusing on three major things, as always, which is protecting and managing our lands for wildlife and outdoor recreation. And number two, which is big for me, is conserving our water resources. And number three will be motivating Georgians to get out and enjoy and appreciate our natural resources. We want you to do that because we know that ultimately people will only protect what they love and understand. We know that. That's proven. And so we want our citizens to be able to make good decisions about the environmental challenges that we all face, from water use to how we manage these things. One of my personal heroes, maybe a hero of some of you guys, is Teddy Roosevelt. He's considered by many, including me, to be our first conservation president. And he said, and I quote, "There can be no greater issue than that of conservation in this country. Conservation is a great moral issue." That was his quote, one of them. And I know this is something the citizens of Paulding County understand, because you have all clearly prioritized land conservation. I think we're up to about 26,000 acres here, the Sheffield and everything. And at DNR, we'll work diligently to balance the growth and development that make Georgia such a vibrant state, with the need to protect the natural and cultural resources that support the quality of life we all enjoy here. But as you know, we can't do it alone. Building partnerships and sharing information are central to my management philosophy, and we need people like all of you across this state to help us. The partnership between county, state, and private sector interests to purchase Paulding Forest is a great example. This partnership protected parts of Paulding County for you, your children, and your grandchildren, and their grandchildren. So with that, I want to thank you for letting me come today, and I give you a ton of information, so I wanted to give you a chance for Homer to answer some of your questions. But thank you for having me, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. We always want to give a gift to our speakers and appreciate you coming out today, and thank you very much.